Now in this video I have an old, I think it was an ATX power supply they called these things, out of these sort of Pentium era computers. This was a friend was just chucking this out in the pile of e-waste, so I grabbed it, thought I'd have a look at it, see if it actually works. And they're kind of interesting to look at, just for old time's sake. I actually used to repair these for a computer store that I did a lot of monitors for. They were a good customer and they asked if I could do them for them. And I think I just agreed to like $10 each to fix them, and I'd just basically collect a box full of them and send me a box at a time, and I'd just sort of do it in my spare time, like on a public holiday or something when I had to go into work or something, and just went through them, and anything that was difficult just got put to one side. Usually they got just stripped for parts, and all the easy ones I fixed, and you would actually manage to fix about 95% of them, surprisingly, including a few dud ones that you just often you'd pinch the filter capacitors out. Most of them had 2 filter caps because they were made for 120 volts. So this one's not switchable, I take it. Now this is just a 240 volt one, so this might be even a bit later. Most early ones had 110, 120 switching. You'd often get bulgy main filter caps. They'd blow the transistors in them. Sometimes they just had silly things like some of these little capacitors to ground would short out. A lot of them were very simple to fix. It's only 4 screws out of the case, 4 screws and the board's loose, and you could fix them surprisingly quickly once you knew what you're doing, because they were just often just the same faults over and over again. And like I say, when they got other faulty ones there that weren't worth fixing because they're too blown up or had a weird problem, you could just use the parts, and they were surprisingly economical to fix. You could make pretty good money doing them, even at $10 a pop sort of thing. So I used to do a few of them. Haven't touched one in a long time. They got cheaper and cheaper over time, so eventually probably weren't really worth doing. And of course now everyone's on tablets and laptops and whatever, but now that I've had an inspection of it, there's nothing obvious dead in there. So I'm not sure why this thing was actually pulled out. I've got one of these extra 6-pin connectors. I forget what that was for. That's your main connector there. These ones are switched on by, instead of having an actual, well, power switch like that, the older ones used to have like a power cord came out of it and had a main switch that went to the front panel of the computer and screwed on there, and that had to come out when you change the power supply. These ones, the actual motherboard just has a push button switch on the front or whatever, goes to the motherboard and comes up one of these lines to turn it on. Floppy drive / CD-ROM drive connectors. What are these ones? These are a bit more fancy. I'm not even sure what they're for. That was your motherboard. I think that was an extra one on the motherboard. Not sure what that was for. So long I've pretty much forgotten all this stuff. And this is a bit later than the ones I was mainly working on. That's your little 3.5 inch floppy. That one's broken anyway. Adapter, that's a 5.25 inch power connector. And of course the CD-ROMs I think normally had the 5.25 connector on them. I think it was just the 3.5 inch. Use these little ones. Don't really even need that. Oh, this one's got an adapter to that. Oh, is that a... No, it's not an ATA connector or something, is it? Maybe it is a hard drive connector or something. Could be something. It looks something like that. They do look vaguely familiar. But that's not anything I'm particularly interested in. What I did just dig out is something I did keep from my repair days, is this dummy load I made up. Basically that same computer store, I got them to give me a pin out of where all the pins are on these power supplies, and they gave me an old motherboard that was shot, and I unsoldered the power connector off the motherboard so I can plug into these things. And to that I fitted, what do we got? I've even written 12 volts, so that's the 12 volt dummy load, which doesn't need to be overly high, and they're not meant to pull the full current, but enough to, because some of these power supplies, one of the faults in them you'll get is they would drop the output voltage under load, but with no load they'd look fine. Normally you just check these power connectors, I forget which one's which, but I think 12 volt was the red, 5 volt was the yellow, and the 2 blacks are just ground. I think they're just joined together. So the first place of port of call on these is always just check those 2 lines on the floppy drive connectors. So at 12 volts, got an LED to indicate that it's got the voltage there. We've got a lot more load here. What have we got? 2.2 ohm with another 1.3 ohm 20 watt across it, a 4.7. So I've just used random old resistors I've had, another 4.7 I think to help spread the heat out a bit. These are old television, you can see the Matsushita symbol, so that came out of probably an old national television or something. And I think I put so many in there, like I say, just to spread the heat out a bit over a few different things, because this was just normally sitting on my bench. I never bothered actually setting up. I think I was going to put it on a metal plate or a wooden plate or something, piece of wood. And I never bothered because it just got pulled out. I went through a pile of them and then it got put back in the drawer and didn't get used for months until I needed to do another batch of them. And again, another LED there, just to indicate that we have the voltage there. And the other thing you've got to add is a power switch. So it looks like the switch is not just a momentary action, it is a click switch. And I forget what the green LED's for. Was that for another voltage? Was that something? It might have been something to do with the power switch or something. I think that is a standby 5. Yeah, that I'm pretty sure these put out a standby 5 volts or something, so that the motherboard has voltage to switch, or maybe it's just to go to a switch. But I think it has a little standby, much like a television set or something, that before the main board turns on, there's a little standby 5 volt to go through, so that the board can tell the power supply to fire up properly, which wakes up the rest of the board. So we should be able to just plug that in. And that's off. And see if this thing fires up. Normally you'll know because the fan will come on and that sort of thing. Good old IEC mains cord. Well, we've got our green light on. So that is a standby light. Oh, it came on and then it died. So that's probably the issue with this one. The fan ran for a second, LEDs light up. So it's maybe detecting overcurrent or something like that. I guess the other thing I could do is maybe disconnect my load and see if it runs with no load on it, or no load on the 5 volts. Which may, you know, it doesn't mean it's not faulty, it just means it is able to fire up. I've still got our standby light on even though I've turned the power off. It ran for a little bit longer maybe. I can hear it making a weird noise too. Oh yeah, that's an unhappy switch mode. Something's not running right in there. Not surprising, it may well just be more dud capacitors or something, so it looks like he did replace this because it was faulty. I assume that was the case. Not sure why he still had the old one, maybe he changed it over himself rather than got someone to do it for him. Now these, when they don't run, you've got to be super careful of these capacitors. They will give you a hell of a boot, they can potentially kill you if you get across them. That's a 330 mic at 400 volts. That's why I've still got a standby light. So something in there is charged. It might just be secondary caps. But we could probably have a quick look and see what's going on. But it could be that primary, if it's in fault mode, the primary may be charged. So you've got to treat this thing with a fair bit of caution, even when you're unscrewing it. Anything on this side of those two transformers is potentially live or high voltage. That heat sink's often live in them, so you don't want to short that onto the case or anything with your screwdriver. Are there any more screws in this? There must be more than that. Where are they? Just see from below if I can find. There's 2 things there, there's another one there, so it's under all this wiring somewhere. That'll be right. They always have to hide them, but this side should be pretty safe to touch. Where is it? Oh, it's over here further. It's in amongst these negative wires. Still can't see it. It's right in quite deep near the toroidal. Oh, there it is. So yeah, most ones I fix are a bit more basic than this one. And that heatsink's probably okay to touch. I think we've got, oh yeah, we've got something in the heatsink. You usually got to unclip this. Probably should remove our load. Unclip all this wiring out of it, because that'll allow the board out of the case. The fan's going to have to disconnect by the look of it. And maybe the 240 volt stuff. Ah, well, they haven't put a plug on the fan. Not that uncommon. Might have to just unscrew the fan is the other option. And how do we get this black clip out of here? This one just pushes out, I think. And then you've got to drag all the wire sideways. There's the little pieces, a heap of little bits that just go through the hot metal and push outwards to stop it coming back through. Typical little kind of grommet design. Wow, this really has the water cables on it. May almost have to cut that cable tie to get them loose enough. I think they'll come. Here they come. Yeah, it's a massive water cables. I guess I can at least go in the recycling if I can't do anything with this thing. I don't really intend to waste any time on it. I have zero use for it, but might as well see if there's anything obvious causing it to not run. And we should be loosing the board, which we are. Still doesn't feel like it wants to lift. What am I missing here? There is a little metal bracket down this end. Again, try not to touch any of these heat sinks. Is there another one somewhere? May have to peel the back. It should slide back that way then. Oh, there we go. Let's just, we can work on it like that probably. Let's check that filter cap. Because that's our main concern at the moment, that we're not live on that thing. No, it's only about 6 volts in there, so that wasn't holding all the charge. But definitely treat that, and anything the side of this sort of track here is potentially live. We've got our 240 volts in there, down this side, bridge rectifier, filter cap and so on. Diodes and switching transistors and the like. Now does this here, that would be an opto coupler there I would think, or probably a pair of little ones by the look of it. 2 4-pin opto couplers, there they are. So yeah, that's usually what gives feedback to the primary side as to what's going on in the secondary. So any faulty caps or anything on the rails feeding into those things. As with any switch mode power supply, faulty signal on this side, like filter caps not doing their job and getting the voltage up high enough, will send a signal back to the primary side and tell it it's got an overload situation or something, because they basically monitor the output so that if the voltage goes down they crank this up to supply a bit more power and that sort of thing. But if it gets too low because the filter caps are shot or something, it'll just be rubbish feeding in here, and it'll either run badly or not run at all. It can think it's an overcurrent situation, and sometimes they have resistors on the secondary side that they monitor the current draw through. Sometimes they have them on the primary side as well, and the collectors of the transistors, all sorts of different setups for switch modes. Hopefully I'll do some videos on some of that, but it's hard to even find faulty ones these days, and it gets to be a bit of a knack, and I haven't done it for so long. I've probably lost a bit of the knack, but a lot of them you could tell by the sound they make whether they're overloaded, underloaded, or just some general fault in them. But they will squeal or buzz or do all sorts of different things depending whether they've got a short circuit on them. A lot of them don't like running with no load. Some of them will explode if they don't have any load on them. They'll blow the driver transistors. I think most of these computer ones used to have sort of load resistors across the rails. So of course, since they're a consumer thing, if someone leaves this plug out and doesn't plug any floppy drives in or anything, it still has a load to pull the rails down enough that the power supply doesn't sort of run away and over oscillate or whatever it does until it blows itself up. I don't see anything obvious faulty here, but definitely these rails, whatever the rails, these optos come off, but that looks like they go right around the other side. I still try not to put my fingers anywhere on that primary side. So what have we got? We've got yes, we've got a cap there that's right up against the diode. Is probably the first one I would be checking. I guess we'll just check there's no voltage on that. I think it's that one right there. Looks pretty dead. Always start with the parts that are located next to heat, particularly if it's electrolytic capacitors. And it's pretty low, so chances are it's good. Sometimes you get switch modes that are really picky, and even though a capacitor measures very close to its ESR value, it's still dead enough that the power supply is not happy. God, is that one hard up against the heatsink there? They really cram stuff into this thing. It's no wonder, given the heat they run at, that they die. It's in a bit of heat shrink. I think it's a D something. It's next to that toroidal. It can be very hard to even find where the part is located. Is that a D? That should be a capacitor. It says D35. I don't think that's no D. I'll just put an ESR meter on it and see what we get. Can't always believe what you read on the boards. Very low, so that probably is an electrolytic capacitor. Hiding in some heat shrink. Jammed in there. I mean, that is a wonder that thing's any good. There's another one there, which is probably, oh, it's that thing there, I reckon. Very low. See, those other ones are reading a bit higher, which is not necessarily a good sign. So I don't think we're going to have a dead cap in this one. Look at it, you never know, you've got to check every one of them. Another one there. Ugh, cobwebs. Oh god, they're everywhere. That is the problem with them, they're absolutely chockers of the things. I think that's one there. There's another one hiding about there. That's nice and low, that one will be fine. So there's 4 of them. Is there any more hiding in the wiring? Did I check that one? I think I did. There's 2 more at the end there. No idea where that. .01, that's nice and low. Probably because there's 2 of them across each other. That measures the same. I bet they're joined together. Those 2 pins are joined together. Oh, that one's, oh yeah, oh no. So if it's not a faulty electro, what is it? That's where you'd kind of give up on a lot of these if it wasn't something obvious. Not much point wasting any more time. Oh, there's a little tiny one down there. Oh, there's another opto couple hiding in there, because this is a, I guess a little, it could be something on the primary side of course. That is your little standby power supply, I guess. That's not likely to cause the issue. It's when we fire up the big one through that transformer. But, it's such a pain to work on. Where is that little capacitor there, maybe? 10, which could be fine for that if it is a capacitor. It's going to be something that's absolutely tiny. There's another one. It could even be the filter cap yet, but another one hiding there somewhere. Jeez, I cannot even find the bloody things. Do you reckon that's it? It's on an angle, I think. That bloody thing there, maybe? Geez, the horrible layout in this thing. And there's another one on the other side of that heatsink. Maybe that thing. I think that that thing. That was what I looked at before, I think. Anything hiding anywhere else? Probably should check across that mains filter cap. That's probably okay. So this is where you get in the territory of, do we have a high value resistor? Do we maybe have a faulty optocoupler? Probably not likely, but yeah, soldering looks alright, so I don't know that I can do much more with this one. So I'm not too sure about that, whether this could even be a different power supply that needs something else. But at least I finally checked it. It's been lying around here for ages. And it's very slow to discharge the cap. That's why I say these things are dangerous. You do not want to come across that. Anything above 30 volts can give you a boot. But it is slowly discharging at least. It's not one of these ones that leaves it fully live. But I don't think I'll do any more with that. I mean, I don't know if they're worth anything more these days than they used to be, but you know, second hand they weren't worth much more than $10 back in the day. But I think unfortunately this one probably wants the, I mean, the board might be worth keeping to pinch a few parts off maybe and cut the wiring off and get in the scrap metal. And that's probably about it with this one. I might just do a quick bit of research. That just looks like it's the 5 and ground connection. Oh yeah, these edge connectors are for hard drive by the look of it. Oh yeah, I think they've got, this has probably got the 3.3 volts as well maybe, is that what it is? But it's worth having a look at one, and at least I can explain sort of what it was like repairing some of these old things. But they were quite repairable. I was actually shocked how many I got going. You know, I get a box of 20, 30 of them at a time I think, and I'd be surprised how few went in the rubbish. Sometimes you maybe get 5 or 6, and other times I think you only get 2 or 3 that weren't actually economical to repair, and they were all like cheapo sort of brands, Taiwanese, Chinese, whatever they were in those days, all the sort of cheapest, nastiest ones you could find a lot of the time. I know one batch of them, there's a couple of blue capacitors there. You got your input mains filter, a couple of inductors, a cap, another inductor, and there should be a couple of those capacitors to ground, and a whole batch of them they just put normal ceramic capacitors in there, not these sort of mains rated, or often they're 400, 1000 volts or something they're rated at, special blue caps made to go, because I think they basically go to ground. They're like a little pi filter or whatever to ground, and they just put a bunch of these ones and they just all cooked up in them. So I did get quite a few of them, all from the same manufacturer. I think this company might have actually put them in new in their computers and sold them to the customers and had to replace them under warranty or something, or maybe out of warranty, but either way they'd all failed just because someone put the wrong caps in them. But even the ones with blown transistors, a lot of the time I think you replace the transistors and they would actually go again, especially if you checked all the caps around there. Can't really remember whether there was an issue that caused the transistors to blow in them. Sometimes I think you replace them and they'd blow and you couldn't find why, so that was just one that went on the junk heap. And again, you just use bits out of the ones you couldn't fix, or I often had other old power supplies and junk lying around. I'd just tack a couple of old transistors out of something in there. Often I did that with customer repairs too. If you weren't sure what caused the switch mode to blow, best to just tack some old parts in there, and that way if you blow them you don't care, rather than, you know, $10, $20 part. The customer certainly doesn't want to pay for it and you don't want to pay for it, so best to just dag a second hand one under the board or something and just get the thing running before you go and put a new part in it. I know I've fixed TVs that other blokes have worked on and put 3 or 4 different sets of parts in the power supply, and you find there's a resistor, high value resistor or something in there that caused the thing to fail, and they never bothered to check the resistors because they never failed much. So a lot of people just, for some reason it didn't occur to them that once something blew up and you didn't know why, that there's usually some reason for it. You know, occasionally it was a power surge or that kind of thing, dry joints or something, but oh, that screw isn't going in. But usually, especially newer stuff, when the power supply failed, it was a high value resistor or something, so that's another thing that can go in them. This thing could have something like that, but with surface mount parts and that, it's a bit of a pain to track them down. And it has no real value to me, so we'll give up on that one. Hopefully there isn't something silly. I don't think the fan's got a sense wire. Some things, they would even detect if the fan was faulty or something, and that could cause weird faults like this. So if it detected it's a faulty fan, the power supply wouldn't run because, you know, it didn't want to overheat type of thing. But of course no one told you they designed it that way, so you'd go chasing around things and eventually work out that it was actually the fan or something like that. Some of the Panasonic amps would go in an overload mode or something, flashing on the display just because it had dry joints on the fan on the back. And it was just when you turn the volume up, it would go into overload, but it was just because it detected that the fan didn't come in. So I guess it was trying to get you to stop using it so you didn't overheat it, which, you know, of course no one told you that. So you spend ages trying to track down why it was going into overload, and it was something as silly as that. But anyway, they're an interesting old thing. They are worth trying to repair if you really need one these days. I don't know if these can still be bought, but a lot of the early ones I assume have been long out of production by now. Basic Power. Made in China, copyright 2006, so this is a bit later. This one, I got out of doing this sort of thing by around 2005. So this is a year later than that. Glad I didn't have to deal with these ones. Model BP 500, so 500 watt I guess. Universal input and PFC. Oh, power factor correction maybe. Dangerous voltages, blah blah blah. DC output 5, 12, 12, yeah, 3.3. Has it got a minus 12 possibly? I think they might have. Plus 5 volt standby, so that's what that green LED is. Oh, it does put up to 2.5 amps. That's why it's got a pretty big rectifier on that line. Wow. Yeah, 30 amps at 3.3, 18 amps at 12. They got another 18 at 12, so I don't know if they really are separate outputs, maybe. I wouldn't have thought you'd have that many peripheral things running off the 12 volts. I guess the hard drives maybe pull a bit, but man, that's quite a lot. And 30 amps at 5 volt. Plus 3.3 plus 5 volt max load 152, so it looks like you only put 152 watts. I reckon they're possibly, I wonder if they're coming off the same line or something. You get a maximum of 30 volts out of the 5 amp, maximum 30 out of 3.3, but probably a maximum of 30 out of the two combined or something is what they're saying. Yeah, at 152 watts, that would work out at 5 volts, 30 times 5. Since power equals voltage times current, that's about what they're saying, I think, there. Oh well, it was worth a quick look, and now I can at least know that it's junk and I can deal with it appropriately. So thanks for watching.